When I first called, his wife answered. And she told me he was driving. Could he call back in a little bit? And I said that would be fine. A little bit later, my phone rang, and he introduced himself. And he told me, he said, Ann, he said, I can fly the heck out of helicopters in Vietnam, but I can't talk on the phone and drive in Houston, Texas at the same time. I began to tell him about Fort Chadbourne and what we were doing here and what we were trying to do and to perpetuate Fort Chadbourne into the future. I told him about our Medal of Honor walls and all the names that are listed there. And I told him we didn't want it to just represent the Medal of Honor recipients, but to honor our active military and all our veterans. And he listened to my story, and he said he would like to be a part of it. He was intrigued by what we had done here. So before we hung up, I said, do you have a bio that I could use on the programs or whatever? And he said, Ann, Google me. I'm out there. And yes, I Googled him. I read his citation. I read all the information that popped up on my computer screen. And I was amazed at his story and at his courage. On November the 26th, 1968, he went above and beyond the call of duty. He saved the lives of 6 men who in a matter of minutes would either been killed or captured. On that day, he became an American hero. And I'm very proud tonight to introduce to you Air Force Medal of Honor recipient, Colonel James P. Fleming.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I get started, I'd like to say what a high honor and privilege it is to be here tonight and to watch young Americans walk on this stage with flags of their services, the American flag, and we all stand, put our hands over our heart. Am I all right? Put our doesn't like the word heart. Put our hands over our hearts, and then someone comes up and says a prayer, and we praise God. This is where America lives. This is the heartbeat of America, where we are tonight, and I'm extremely honored to be here and to be part of it. Harry Truman, on the 2nd of May, 1946, stood in Independence, Missouri, speaking toward the Daughters of the American Revolution. And he said, an after-dinner speech should be like a woman's dress. Short enough to be interesting, but long enough to cover the subject. So I hope I can do that tonight. I must go to your little handout, if you would, and go to the back page. There's a picture of me in the Medal of Honor ceremony in the White House with President Nixon. That's my father, the little guy standing there. My father flew a C-47 off Saipan in February 1945 and dropped gun barrels and blood plasma to the Marines on Iwo Jima. My wife, who I've been married to for 52 years, is looking down. And what she's looking at is my daughter Rebecca taking off and putting on Band-Aids off of her leg. President Nixon thought that was very, very charming. Remember the movie Cool Hand Luke? Paul Newman, Arthur Kennedy, and there was one sentence in that movie that is in the top 10 of all sentences in movies. Does anyone remember what it was? It was done by Strother Martin. And he said, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." I have 10 grandchildren, from 25 down to 13. And like most parents and grandparents, we never admit it, but there's always one. There's always not special, but a little bit special. And mine is a granddaughter named Hannah. We took care of her for a weekend, and she wanted to go somewhere. And I said, "No, you can't. I don't know those people. I don't know where you're going to go. You can't go." And she says, "Why?" I said, "Well," and I was being an adult. I said, "Well, honey, I don't know them, and I don't know where you're going, and I'm not comfortable with it. Why?" So I dug deep, and I went to the bottom of the pool. And I came up with a tried and true answer. Because I said so. That's why. So I receive in the mail the invitation for tonight. That picture was taken 25 years ago, if you didn't notice. And I'm at my desk, and she's visiting and walks by, and she says, "Ooh, who's that?" I said, "Well, honey, that's me some time ago." She says, "Well, why is your picture on there?" She says, "Well, some nice people have invited me to speak at a dinner down in Bronte, Texas." And she says, "An evening with a hero?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Are they going to auction you off?" I said, No, dear. They're not going to auction me off." She says, "Well, it says an evening with a hero. How are they going to get an evening with you if they don't sell you?" I said, "Honey, we don't sell people in this country. I'm not to be auctioned off, and I'm not going to be." Then she says, "What do you think you'd go for?" Because I said so. That's why. The Medal of Honor. I've had it for almost 50 years. I've worn it for almost 50 years. There are 76 living holders of the Medal of Honor. 10 from the Gulf Wars, 6 from Korea, 7 from World War II, and 53 from the Vietnam War. There are 3 living from the United States Air Force. Joe Jackson, 123 Cam Duck, he's 94 years old. Leo Thorsness, POW, Wild Weasel pilot, he's 84 years old. And James Fleming, 43 years old. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was born in 43. I'm sorry. In my ceremony at the White House, there were 12 of us. Army, Marine, Air Force, Marine, Navy, Air Force. And I stood next to a young man named Bob Kerrey, who was the governor of Nebraska later on, senator from Nebraska, ran for president, dated Deborah Winger. And someone asked him once, "How do you receive the Medal of Honor?" And he said, "You have to do something, someone has to see it, someone has to write about it, and you can't have a lot of enemies up the chain of command." Now let's flesh that out a little bit. You got to do something. America is unique. We, by a great majority, give medals of honor to soldiers, sailors, airmen for selfless acts in helping their comrades. You can never be criticized if you don't do something. For example, I know personally 5 Marines from Vietnam that jumped on grenades in a foxhole and accepted the explosion and were wounded terribly and received the Medal of Honor. If they had not jumped on that grenade, they could not be criticized for not jumping on that grenade. You have to do something. Someone has to see it. I just so happened to have 29 people see what I did. A flight of 5 helicopters, 4 people in each helicopter. One of the helicopters had a Green Beret medic. There was a forward air controller. And there were 7, not 6, but 7 people on the ground, 3 Americans and 4 employees of the United States government. Someone has to write it down. Oh, yes, Alice, the bureaucracy works everywhere. If you don't have someone write it down, if you don't have someone get the affidavits that have to be done, it doesn't happen. And you can't have a lot of enemies up the chain of command. Proof of that is, in the last 50 years, our presidents, rightly so, have had this Department of Defense wash medals. And they have found out that blacks, Jews, Asians were denied recognition in the Medal of Honor because up the chain of command someone didn't like blacks, didn't like Jews, didn't like Asians. And some of that was righted in the last 50 years. Well, let's put all that together. You got to do something, someone has to see it, someone has to write it down. You don't have a lot of enemies up the chain of command. On the 26th of November 1968, I was a young helicopter pilot in an organization called MACSOG, Military Assistance Command Studies and Observations Group. I was in the 20th Helicopter Squadron, Special Operations Squadron. And our job was to infiltrate Special Forces, Navy SEALs, civilian employees of the United States government behind enemy lines to go and do different intelligence missions, harassment missions, and other exotic missions. On the 26th of November 1968, my crew and I put 7 people into Cambodia. We got a team okay. A lot of procedures involved on how to do that, but we got a team okay. In other words, they thought they had been put in and not compromised. We went back to a place called Duco Special Forces Camp, and they got compromised about an hour later. There were about 300 North Vietnamese coming down a trail. Now, these weren't your black pajamaed farmers carrying AK-47s. These were hardcore North Vietnamese soldiers wearing hard hats, white stars on them, AK-47s, wearing brand new boots, brand new leggings. And they came down that trail, and the team we had put in was a road watch team, and they were supposed to watch as people came down that trail, count them, take pictures of them, what kind of equipment they bring in. Well, these Vietnamese decided to stop and have a rest, have a cigarette, take a leak. The team was set up on this road, and as these soldiers stopped and started to fan out, the lead Green Beret up against a tree with an M79 grenade launcher says a North Vietnamese soldier came over and peed on him. I don't know if you've ever hunted a rabbit with a pistol or a rifle. If you hunt rabbits that way, all you have to look in a thicket, and if you see the rabbit's eye, you see the rabbit. Your brain works that way. Well, sure enough, this soldier sees Sergeant Frank's eye. As soon as he sees his eye, he sees Frank, he gives the alarm, he jumps back. The team I put in opened up a killing zone, which is Army talk, other than they put out a lot of lead, and they start leapfrogging out of the area. They call for immediate extraction. We're at Duco Special Forces Camp. We get alerted. The team's in contact. We go out. 5 ships, 2 gunships, 3 slicks. I'm the pickup slick. That's my team. I put them in. I pick them up. That's my duty. That's my honor. That's my team. The other slick has a medic. In case someone's wounded, then it's his team. Another slick is empty. It's the rescue slick. We're in Cambodia, 1968. I remember reading a Time magazine where President Nixon said, "We're not in Cambodia." Who am I to argue with the President of the United States? We carried our own rescue with us, 1 slick helicopter, 2 gunships, procedures. Forward air controller gets out there. He finds the team by either a flare, a mirror, a smoke, some way he needs to visually find that team, because I'm on the treetops. I don't know where I am. I've got to be vectored into where that team is. So he goes out and he finds the team by having them pop a smoke. We get out there, procedures. The gunships go in first. They want to sanitize the area to pick this team up. The team has been beat down to a riverbank. Their backs are to the river, they can't get across, and they're fighting off the enemy. The gunships go in. Now, these gunships are really cool. They're flying the same helicopter I'm flying, but they've got a big bucket in the back that has 12,500 rounds of ball ammunition. They've got a minigun in this door and a minigun in this door. You pull 1 trigger, you get 2,000 rounds a minute. You pull 2 triggers, you get 4,000 rounds a minute. This one over here does the same thing. You can cut corn with that gun. And I have been on training missions on the ground, and let me tell you, if you hear it go off, you won't have a bowel movement for a week. It is that awesome to hear that thing go off and see the fire come out of it. Also, they're carrying 2 rocket pods, 7 2.75 rockets on each side. The gunships go in. What they're going to do is they're going to go over that team. If they receive, they'll go over that team and they'll do a figure 8 around that team. If they receive gunfire, they will fight and shoot until they run out of ammunition. If they run out of ammunition, they'll go get more ammunition. If they get shot down, that's a new ball game. They do a figure 8. A guy named Dave Miller is flying 1 gunship. The enemy was pulling a Chinese 51 caliber machine gun with them. Bullets about this big. And when it hits a helicopter, it's really devastating. They stitch the first gunship, Dave Miller. He starts on fire, he raises up, goes across the river, and crash lands. Remember I told you the 2 slicks, 1 rescue slick, 1 medic slick? The rescue slick comes down, picks up the crew, and off they go. They can't do any more. The medic slick has a fuel fluctuation problem and heads home. The second gunship across is Leonard Gonzalez. Leonard Gonzalez receives the Air Force Cross today. Leonard Gonzalez goes across the same time right behind Dave Miller, and he takes 51, and they hit him also. He starts trailing blue smoke out of his tailpipe. Now, I've been counting. I'm the only one left. Gonzalez goes over to an open area on the Cambodian side, and he starts circling an open area. And I say, intentions, he says, we can't figure out what they hit, but we do know we've got smoke coming out of the engine. And at that point, I decided that it would be a good opportunity, now that we have the enemy excited. They've shot down a helicopter. They've seen all the helicopters leave. And they've seen one over there trailing smoke, that I could sneak in. And I let the FAC know, vector me in, and he did. He caught me. I'm up the river, came back around, made it across the river, hit the zone where the team, I thought the team was, and they weren't there. So I started hovering down this river. And my right door gunner, J.J. Johnson, gun jams. We have 2 60 calibers, 1 on each door. They're just they're little, comparatively, they're just little machine guns. His gun jams. He never gets it fixed during this entire operation. My right gunner, Fred Cook, bravest man I've ever known in my life, bravest man I've ever known, about 5'6", weighed about 93 pounds, from Alabama, and had that Alabama accent that just, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. And he's shooting. And I look up, trying to fly, trying to look, and everything else. And I see people everywhere moving around. We start taking battle damage. By the way, my co-pilot is a Major Paul E. McClellan. He was my father's co-pilot at Larson Air Force Base, Moses Lake, Washington, when I was in high school. He's a retread coming from B-52s to helicopters. He's along for his cherry ride, his first ride in combat. They sent him with the kid. All he's supposed to do, and you pilots in the room know this, all he's supposed to do is sit there. If I ask him something, he'll answer. If I don't, if I go down, he'll take over. I don't want his help. I'm busy enough without having people talk to me. I'm listening to the FAC, I'm listening to the ground, I'm listening to the gunships, I'm listening all kinds of things. So he sits there, monitors the controls. In case something happens to me, it's his business. Okay, so we're in there. The team, Randy Harrison was the team lead, Lieutenant Harrison.